Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa. Again, science advisor Matt Moniz and Stephanie Burke both off tonight, and we'll be joined by our guest John David Miller in just a moment. But I do want to address the situation that happened at House of Bricks, Brickiversary. For those of you who don't know, I am the ring announcer for a local wrestling organization that puts on shows that benefit local charities and children's organizations. And so as the ring announcer, sometimes you get kind of in the mix of things a little bit. I try not to, but wrestlers and managers tend to get up in my face sometimes because they don't like the way I'm announcing things. And so last night at Brickiversary, the former heavyweight champion, the Thunder from Down Under, Michael Foster, was participating in a triple threat match along with Chris Cruz and the current House of Bricks heavyweight champion, the Outlaw Moonshiner, JB Tickle. And the Thunder from Down Under comes out first. Michael Foster came out first, and he got a little upset with the fact that I did not announce him as the champion. But why would I announce him as the champion when he lost the championship a couple of months ago to JB Tickle? So I said, I didn't announce you as the champion because you're not the champion. And he's had some words with me, and we had a little bit of a stare down in the ring, but he went to his corner, and I announced the other two competitors in the match. But he just kept giving me all kinds of crap. So the people, the fans of House of Bricks, they always refer to him as a nugget. It's their derogatory nickname for him, and they will chant nugget while he's wrestling. Well, he got under my skin last night, and perhaps it wasn't the most professional thing for me to do. I kept the chance of nugget going throughout the match. And because I have a live mic in my pocket, I took full advantage of that. And I was going around the arena, and I was interviewing the kids and being like, so what do you think of this guy? He's a nugget. And I'd walk over and be like, hey kids, chant nugget into the microphone. I just kept it going. And TJ Richter, the referee for the match, was turning around telling me like, Tim, what are you doing? Like, you're asking for trouble. And I said, don't worry about me. So in the ring afterwards, I guess, Michael Foster took a cheap shot at JB Tickle, and he was down on the ground, and then Foster and Cruz were outside. There was a double count out for them, which I don't know how you have a double count out in a triple threat match. But anyway, so, all the stuff's going down. I get in the ring. I announce JB Tickle as the winner. Foster gets all up in my face again. So I get the crowd to chant nugget, and when I turn my back on him in the ring, he nails me in the back of the head, takes me down, proceeds to start stomping on my head, drops the knee on my head a couple of times, kicking me while I'm down, and just basically lays a beat down on me. To the point where, the officials had to come into the ring and stop him and hold him back. And now Brickhouse Baker, who is the owner of House of Bricks Wrestling, he's usually working the camera around the ring. And he never exercises any kind of authority as the owner. He tries to stay out of it and say, I have a commissioner in John Cena Sr. I let him handle the way that things are run. I'm just the owner of the company, and I don't really get involved in things. But he actually got up into the ring, started chewing out Michael Foster for what he did, and suspended him indefinitely. So Michael Foster is indefinitely suspended from House of Bricks Wrestling. He will not get another chance to try and compete for that title. I'm going to talk to Commissioner Cena, and I'm going to see if we can get him banned for life. Because although I was asking for it a little bit, like, to sneak attack me when my back is turned, if you want to have words with me to my face, and you want to start some trouble with me face to face, I'm fine with that. And like I said, I probably deserve it a little bit. But that's the way that you handle business, face to face. You don't attack somebody from behind and then proceed to kick them while they're down. You want to fight me, you fight me one-on-one. You fight, and it doesn't even have to be in the ring. I'm not a wrestler. You want to settle it, we'll settle it in the back, we'll settle it outside. But it was just a cowardly act on his part, and I'm through with it. I'm through with him picking on me. This is a guy that always cheats to win, even when he have the title. He was always cheating to keep the belt. He's always telling me what to say in the ring, and I've had enough. So for those of you who were showing concern on my Facebook post that I put up last night when I got back from the show, I'm doing a little bit better. But we'll see. I think I won't feel 100% until I can find out for sure that Michael Foster's not going to be causing any problems for anybody else in House of Bricks for the rest of his career. So there you go. That's just a little bit of an update on that for those who have been asking. And I want to thank our guest for being patient while I talked about wrestling, because this is a paranormal show, which we've talked about pretty much everything but that to this point tonight. But we'll change that right now, because Dave Miller spent every summer as a child playing in the caves surrounding Greenville, West Virginia, deep in the Appalachian Mountains. This started a lifelong coincidences that one day would draw him back to the very place where he started his adventure, and this life journey would prepare him for what he would find one day buried on the side of the mountain that contains the graves of his ancestors. Dave has been a contributor to Smithsonian Magazine, AncientOrigins.net, and Paranormal Underground Magazine, and he joins us now tonight on the phone. John David Miller. He goes by Dave. Let's bring him on right now. There you are. You with us, Dave?
I sure am. Thanks
All right.
for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening while I got that off my chest about what went on in the ring.
I hope you're doing okay now.
Yeah, I'm doing a little bit better. It's like I said, if my back hadn't been turned, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But when you catch somebody off guard like that,
Sure.
So I want to ask you a question now. For people who are not familiar, and I have an idea because I know a little bit about geography, but for those who are unfamiliar, give us an idea of what the Appalachian region is like from the perspective of somebody who lives there. I mean, we see shows where they talk about mountain people, mountain monsters, all these things. We have an idea of like the glamorized version of living in Appalachia, but it's not like you're cut off from the rest of the world like they try to portray it on TV.
Well, the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains in the world, and people don't realize that they actually were at one time the height of the Alps, and they were worn down to a flat plain, and then they were built back up in the mountain building process again to the same height as the Alps, like 14,000 feet, and then they worn down again to what they are today. And people don't realize that they think they're not as high mountains, so they're not as old, but it's not the truth. And the property that the book's about is near the New River. And the New River, ironically called the New River, is the second oldest river in the world. And people don't realize that either, so it's a very prehistoric place. Now, the Appalachian Mountains could be 650 million years old, whereas the mountains in Peru, the Andes, maybe are only 25 million years old. Yet the mountains in Peru, all kinds of ancient civilizations have been found there where none have been found in the Appalachian Mountains. And my theory on that is just because the mountains are so old that anything there has turned to dust, basically. Anything left now, it has to be made of stone, and apparently nothing has been found until now into the Appalachian Mountains. But the Appalachian Mountains are very prehistoric, and that plays a large role and a large part in the book that I wrote.
So, as much as you want to say, when the area was quote unquote settled, and when we say settled, we mean by the European settlers that came, but when you look back at it, this is an area that has a long history that predates probably even the native civilizations that are in the area, and so this power has been growing. This vortex of strangeness has been growing for millennia.
Correct. Right. In fact, my ancestors, who were the first European settlers in the area, they settled around the New River, around the horseshoe area of the New River, and they were the founding fathers of the New River German settlement. And when they came in there, they were the first settlers in the area, and they picked out the property that I now own as a mill site. And it just so happens that mill site sits in the passage of the mountains, the only passageway east and west through the Appalachian Mountains at that place. So this property I now own was an ancient migration route, and it turned into an Indian trail. And then the European settlers came in and settled it, and it became a modern roads are in there today. But it's amazing that the history of European settlers only goes back 200 years. My ancestors settled the area around 1740, but at that time there were numerous Indian tribes throughout Virginia, and of course, when my ancestors settled there, they became the place that I now own is also the sacred hunting grounds of the Cherokee Indians, and that also plays a big role in the story.
Well, and you've mentioned a few times the property that you now own, but even that, you came about that in kind of or at least became connected to it in a very strange way.
Correct. That's the premise for the whole story. I was on a dive trip in Papua New Guinea. Actually, I was on a dive boat floating in the Coral Sea, and I got a satellite phone call from a real estate agent that I was working with because my girlfriend at the time was going to vet school at Virginia Tech, and we were in the market for a place for her to live. So, and that just so happens I was in Papua New Guinea, and I had got a satellite phone call from the real estate agent, and he had found a property near Blacksburg, near Virginia Tech, that came on the market that day, and there were 3 other offers on the property. And of course, it was in my price range, and I knew that if everybody else wanted the property, it must be a decent piece of property. I knew nothing else about the property whatsoever. So I offered $1,000 over the asking price for the property on the satellite phone. And by the time I got back into the United States, I was the owner of the property.
Wow. And I was going to say,
once I got the property, I was examining the plat of the property for an insurance question and discovered my mother's maiden name scribbled on the bottom corner of the plat of the property, which is Sibold, which is a very unusual name.
So just taking a step back, I mean, that's a very strange thing to have happen. But even before that, when you're just making the initial offer and offering over the asking price, was that because of just how, it was fitting what you were looking for, and obviously you realized other people wanted it and you had to be proactive to get it? Or was there something inside of you telling you, like, no, we definitely have to have this piece of property?
Something inside of me told me to make an offer on the property and go after it immediately when it became available. I really didn't know the full story about the other offers and that sort of thing until a little bit later. But it was something. It was like it was meant to be that I was supposed to have this property, and so I immediately offered the $1,000 over the asking price without even thinking twice about it.
And so then, as you said, you mentioned your mother's maiden name, and was it one of those things where when it first happens, I mean, as you said, it's not a common name, Sibold, but were you kind of like, oh, that's a weird coincidence, or did you know that there was a deeper connection even in that moment?
In fact, the first time I walked up onto the property, this place is the most amazing. I've traveled all over the world, and I've never seen a place as beautiful as this. This property was a mill site, and the house that I just bought was built for the mill manager. So this house overlooks a creek and dam and 3 mountains. The water going over the dam sounds like you're at the ocean when you're on the front porch, but you're in the middle of the mountains. And the mill is no longer there. It burnt down in the 60s, but the creek and dam are still there. So the first time I walked up on the property and walked up on the front porch, I had chill bumps going up and down my spine. And at that moment, I knew that I was brought to this place for a reason. And this was before I found out about my mother's maiden name.
So then obviously, you're feeling this connection. You're feeling like something's drawing you to that, but was there a feeling that it could have been the property itself that had this power on you, or was it kind of just more like fate kind of guiding you in the right direction?
It was more of energy emanating from the property. It was like my body was a tuning fork, and it started vibrating at that harmonic level that was definitely drew my attention, and I knew it was very special at that point. But it was more for of the energy that I was feeling from the standing there on the front porch looking over the area.
So then, just what happens from that point on, where you're feeling this there? How do you start to realize that you want to get to the bottom of what this feeling is? I mean, a lot of people would kind of just feel that and just take it at face value and say, okay, there's definitely some sort of power here, but you were determined to figure out exactly why that was.
True. And I've traveled all over the world, and I love to go to ancient civilizations and just very, very energetic places on Earth. And that's the same feeling I got at that point. And so that was before I found out I saw my mother's maiden name. After I found my mother's maiden name, I immediately started. Now I did know that I had family in the area because I grew up in spending every summer in Greenville, West Virginia, which is only about 30 miles from the crow flies from this place. And Greenville, West Virginia, both of my grandparents on both sides lived across the street from each other, and I used to spend the summers staying with them. But surrounding Greenville is an extensive cave system called the Saltpeter Cave System. And as a small kid, I would play in these caves all day long, every day during the summer. And at that, and playing in those caves, I got the same goosebumps down my spine as I did the day I walked up on that porch in the mountains. And so again, I knew something very special was going on.
So getting those feelings in the caves, but did you ever have any experiences that you would consider paranormal in those caves? Anything that was
not being able to identify what they were? Sure. I always thought that I could feel energy. I could feel energy emanating from what it seemed like at the time inanimate objects, like the caves, like the rocks, the stone, the springs, the water, that sort of thing. I always felt the energy in special places, and I definitely felt it there.
And when you do feel that, I mean, some people just become attuned to that. So kind of picking up on those energies, being young and playing in those caves and being in that area as a young person, as you're exploring the world as you get older, you're probably able to tap into when you feel those same frequencies and vibrations in other places, more so than just other people that are there.
Absolutely. And when I've traveled, I always would search for that feeling, that feeling that I would get at these special places, but I didn't really know what it was. I knew. It sounds like egotistical, but I always felt special. I felt like I was different and unique from everybody else, because I experienced, who else as a kid plays in the cave, plays in their own cave system. So I always felt it was very special, but I didn't really recognize what all this was until actually I wrote the book and tried to figure out, because when I walked up on that porch, I knew that I was brought there for a reason. And what was going through my mind, if I was brought there for a reason, what was that reason?
Right.
And who did it? Who brought me there, and why? And that's what instigated my immediate interest in this property. And that's when I started the next day researching the property, researching the history, and especially after I discovered my mother's maiden name, I then found out that of the first 5, now this place is only about 7 miles from Blacksburg, Virginia. When I started my research, and I knew I had family in the area, and I had resources in the area, family members to talk to, and that sort of thing, and I found out that of the first 5 women that graduated from Virginia Tech in 1925, 2 of them were related to me. One of them, Lucy Lee Lancaster, became the librarian at Virginia Tech Library for the next 52 years. And her hobbies was genealogy. And now her papers, 40 cubic feet of her papers, are archived at the Virginia Tech Library. And so when I found out the Lucy Lee Lancaster collection was there, I immediately reserved those boxes and went in and searched every one of them. And that's when I discovered that the property I just bought was connected to 3 of my first-generation grandfathers from 1738. That's 3 different bloodlines, 3 different first-generation grandfathers to that piece of property. And so at that point, I knew I was brought there for a reason, and I was determined to find out why.
And that must lead into, you probably got kind of like a Venn diagram going on of like, here's the property research, here's my family tree research, and I'm going to bring my genealogy and combine that into the property, and then seeing where that kind of fans out from there. And I'm sure like by that point, as you're putting all these pieces together, you're thinking that you're figuring out some of the puzzle, but just being there on the property, it's throwing new mysteries at you while you're there.
Oh, absolutely. For the first 10 years of my research, as I own this property, I discovered that it's connected to George Washington, the French and Indian War, the Draper's Meadow Massacre, which happened on what is now Virginia Tech property. It was the most amazing history that I've ever put together, and it all was about my property, which this mill site. And for 10 years, I researched that. So I'm trying to find out what the history of this. And I studied the geology of the property because this place is thoroughly prehistoric. I mean, so I studied the history for 10 years, and came to the conclusion, obviously, that this property is very, very special. And I've started to understand what my ancestors had to do with this property. I couldn't really draw the connection on why, my feelings from the very beginning was it was my ancestors who brought me there. But why would they bring me there? That was the biggest question. And it wasn't until actually the supernatural activity started up on the property that I started to put 2 and 2 together. And that's when the supernatural activity started up. I filmed and photographed every bit of it because I knew something was going on. It wasn't a haunting. I knew it wasn't a haunting. It wasn't scary. It wasn't fearful. It was exciting, exhilarating. It was more like a communication event. And I knew something was trying to get in touch with me and to show me something. And I just had no idea what it was, but it was like they fed me clues. They would give me one clue, I would figure it out, and they would give me another one. And I just kept on following the clues, trying to figure out what they meant. And eventually it showed me exactly what I was supposed to find.
And see, that's something that I find to be fascinating when doing paranormal research, because all right, like we're friends here on the show with Amy Bruni and Adam Berry of Kindred Spirits, and they're going out there and they're helping families that are haunted by their own loved ones. But I've always kind of felt like almost that your own loved ones aren't a haunting. If it's your family and your ancestors that are the ones that are active on a property and they're interacting with you, if you were taken out of the equation, the property probably wouldn't have that activity anymore. So it's not really a haunting as much as it is just a connection for you to have with your past loved ones. And it sounds like that's exactly what it was for you. If I went and lived on this property, I might never have a single experience, but because you're there and you're part of that lineage, it's kind of all encompassing and enveloping for you.
That's right. And my girlfriend lived on that property for 4 years as she went to Virginia Tech, and she never experienced anything because she wasn't the target.
Well, you say target, but I don't know if that's, you mean that more like as, more as who they were trying to spotlight into this activity, because it doesn't sound like, it sounds like it's just trying to include you in their collective past, trying to bring you into, this entire history of your family and bring you into that more so than trying to victimize you in any way.
Right. I felt like I was marked as a kid in West Virginia playing in those caves. I've come to the conclusion that I was marked at that point. And that just so happens when I was playing in those caves in West Virginia, in the limestone caves, that limestone belt is the same limestone belt that is the bedrock my house is built on. And of course, you probably know limestone has is known to have spiritual qualities to it, because the limestone was once living organisms at the bottom of an ocean. so most of the answers that finally put everything together for me in this book was mostly when I got involved with the Cherokee folklore and their spirituality. They had the answers that connected everything together and showed me why I was brought there.
And that's what I think is, part of this is there's a reason behind it. A lot of times when there's paranormal activity, there's not always a reason behind it. People say, well, if we can just figure out what it is that they want, maybe they'll go away, type of thing. And I don't think that that's the case a lot of times with activity. Like you said, with that limestone, the factors are just right for a haunting to take place. And so a haunting could keep taking place in perpetuity over and over again for thousands of years without ever having any need to solve anything or figure anything out. But with you, it's different. With you, there's a direct reason and a direct type of story that's trying to be told.
Yeah, that's why I think this story is different than any other story I've ever read anywhere. I've never read a story or heard about a story or researched a story like this, because this was all about purpose and destiny. And when I finally figured out why I was brought there, it all made sense. It all made sense and showed me at that point that all the things that I've experienced during my life were all on purpose leading up to this point. I knew that. Of course, if I was brought there for a reason, I just had to figure out what that reason was.
Right.
And once the supernatural activity started up, and I think the way the supernatural activity started off, that's when I started getting the clues and started figuring out, and that the supernatural activity really lasted for about a year, and it would happen any time I would look for it. It was like it felt like the supernatural activity was happening, but it was being projected from me. That might sound kind of weird, but it was like with the first experience with the supernatural activity. I got a chapter in the book called The Seventh Step, mm-hmm. and I was remodeling the stairs in the house, which were old 300-year-old white oak steps that were covered in paint and carpeting, and I had to hand scrape each step to the bare wood to restore it. And so there were 12 steps altogether. And I started on step number 1. It would take me about a weekend to do one set of steps. When I got to the 7th step, the same chill bumps that I experienced outside when I first arrived started happening, traveling up and down my spine. I could step off the step and they would go away. I could step below the step, they'd go away, or I could step above the step and they would go away. And then I would come back to that step, and I could recreate this experience anytime I wanted to. And so that's when I knew that something was going on, and I knew it wasn't a haunting. So I went and studied all the ghost shows that I could, of course, because I needed to investigate what was going on. And so I bought first of all, I recorded the EVP on the steps. And right at the 7th step, when I was recording the EVP, it wasn't a voice. It was more like an electronic squelch on my recorder. Mm-hmm. And what I assumed from that was that this was something trying to affect my equipment it was trying to get my attention by affecting my electronic equipment. So it did what it only could do with energy that it had, was this electronic squelch, which I recorded and took and went on from there. But I knew but it wasn't scary, but it was definitely a communication event But I was thinking at the time that if these are ancient spirits, maybe, or maybe even ancient Indian spirits, they're not going to really speak in English anyway. So they're not. They really aren't trying. But it just definitely seemed like they were trying to affect my electronic equipment. And that's when I went out and bought a $80 Panasonic infrared video camera, and I filmed the steps in total darkness. And as I panned over the seventh step, I would lose 2 frames. And I did that 3 times, and on the third time, you could see what I can only describe as ectoplasm jump off the 7th step, exactly where I was getting the chill bumps.
Wow.
So that was my first experience on filming something that I didn't know what it was, and I got the impression it was something trying to affect the electronic equipment that I had, so I would notice something was there.
Yeah, because sometimes when you capture, evidence, when you capture data like that, it's kind of just being in the moment and being in the right place at the right time type of thing where, you just happen to capture it in passing. But yours seems like it was specifically making directly reaching out and communicating with you in particular.
Correct, and that's what I felt at the time. I was sure that something was trying to tell me something, and I just didn't know, and they just didn't know how to do it. So, I figured if, the spirit world trying to contact the natural physical world, how would they do it? Well, they would do it by using energy to affect something in the physical world. And that's what I assumed they were doing. It was affecting my camera. It was affecting my recorder. It was trying to, and every time from then on, I started filming things around the house, and I got unbelievable orbs flying around with trails on them, but it was obvious that they were trying to appear for me as I was filming. So so I kept on following these orbs, and these orbs started to appear in every shape and size. And the only way that I could really find them is take video, but go through it frame by frame, because these were extraordinary fast orbs. In fact, when the thing jumped off the 7th step, I only got it in 3 frames, but you could see it change shapes and jump off the stairs in 3 frames. That means if you have 30 frames per second, then it took 1/10 of a second for this jumping off the stairs to happen. And the only way you would know it is by going through the film frame by frame, and then you saw it.
And it wasn't the only thing that was happening while you were finding other strange connections as well besides just paranormal stuff. There were some petroglyphs that you found too.
Well, that's what I kept on following the clues on, and this energy kept on led me around the house. Then it led me out on the front porch, and the iron railings all the way around the front porch. I would get spikes of the electromagnetic field would spike 10 times or tenfold just at certain spots, So after I recorded that and filmed that, I started filming things outside, and especially after weather events. I would my porch overlooked a creek, and I would film. The creek would actually bubble up like a witch's cauldron every time it rained. Now I was associating most of this with gases and stuff like that produced by all the springs running into the creek right there. And when it rained, it was the acid rain going through the rocks and coming out in the creek. It would bubble up like crazy, and I would do it every time it rained. So I started filming the creek every time that it started bubbling up, and then I started filming objects swimming through the water that were unidentifiable. So it basically led me, all this supernatural activity led me down to the creek. And one morning, decided to go investigate the bottom of the dam since the water was at a low level, and I found a rock sitting there on top of sitting there. It must have been underwater forever, and it was the perfect image of a fish head on the rock. And that's when I started to get the idea that these were petroglyphs around there. And one morning, after a light snow, I was on the front porch, and I could see the outline of an old Indian trail cutting across my property. I could see it between the light snow and the dead brown leaves. You could see the trail perfectly. And when I went out to investigate the trail ended right at the road. So I knew there was an Indian trail around this property, but I figured it was covered up years ago. And at the end of the trail where it was cut off and a road was put in near the mill, where the mill was, I found a rock that I could not. It was the oddest looking rock I've ever seen in my life, and this is a permanent rock in the ground. It's not a portable rock. And I took high resolution photographs of the whole area because it all looked kind of strange. And it wasn't until I looked at these high resolution photographs that I realized that these were all carved petroglyphs of the most odd type ever. and I'm now coming to the conclusion the whole mountainside is carved with these petroglyphs. And of course I put them in, I document all this in my book. But this archaeological discovery, I have now written 3 articles for AncientOrigins.net because they believe that I have discovered an ancient civilization on my property. But boy, you're talking about pushback when you start talking. People can grasp the paranormal end of this story.
Right.
They cannot handle the archaeological discovery.
Well, and
it's very bizarre, and I've had the state archaeologists out there and everything.
It makes me wonder if that maybe your previous family that lived there, maybe they were drawn to that area, even though they were settlers that came to that area, but maybe there's some sort of connection between them and that ancient civilization in some way.
Well, there is, because my ancestors were the first settlers in that area, and they settled their colony right on top of this, what I think is an ancient colony, and with even extraterrestrial connections. I've got rocks with perfect images of extraterrestrials on the rocks. So my theory is that my ancestors built their colony on top of another colony, another ancient colony, because remember, this is the perfect passageway through the mountains. It's where an ancient colony would settle, because it has my ancestors were German. They built mills. This property has nothing but energy emanating from it. So if you would think extraterrestrials coming to Earth, thousands, these are probably the ancestors to the American East Coast Indians. But whether they're extraterrestrials, I don't know. But if they were extraterrestrial, they would have picked that spot out to settle. So it's very ironic that my ancestors built their colony on top of an ancient colony.
Well, and those civilizations from other planets or other dimensions or wherever these UFOs may be coming from, they're still visiting you to this day.
That's right. And there's an old folklore of, I think it's the planet of Proton, I believe. But there's an old folklore story where they were the aliens that came to the North America and became the East Coast American Indians eventually. So, don't know. But it all kind of made sense. So I think that's one of the reasons why my ancestors brought me to that property, was to discover what they had mistakenly built on top of. Now, if you believe in spiritualism, and you believe in people, when they die, they go to a spiritual world, you've got to assume that they go to the same place that these extraterrestrials went to when their souls went away. So it's my theory that these my ancestral spirits conspired with these ancient Indian spirits to bring me to this property to find this ancient colony. Because if I wouldn't have come there, these would have never been found, ever. And they were just found because these ancestral spirits or whatever they were showed me where they were. So I researched heavily. I had to research, and this story involves numerology, sacred geometry, elementals, spirit guides. It all ties together to connect everything together.
But it also seems too that when you start to put this all together and put together a bigger picture, this is a story that goes beyond just your family and your connections. I mean, it's basically just putting this all together as kind of like one case study of something that actually applies to all of mankind.
Exactly. In fact, that's one of the things where Cherokee Indians believe that there's three types of ancestral spirits. There's ancestral spirit, blood, and place. So not only are you connected by blood to these ancestors, you're connected by anything that ever had crossed over that land and embedded their energy in there. Plus, you have all the plants and animals that died in that area are part of your ancestral background, and but Cherokee folklore tells us that when spirits contact us, they contact us in dreams and numerology and all these different ways. They contact us in our physical world. But generally, when I was researching like angels and that sort of thing, when they contact people in the physical world, it can be a broad message for mankind they're trying to tell you. Now, it's up to us to figure out what that is. But I do believe that this whole story was put together because it makes a dang good argument for an afterlife. And because you can either believe that everything that happened in this book, everything that I found, all the supernatural activity is all coincidental and random, or you have to believe that it was done for a reason. If it was done for a reason, then what were those reasons? And I really came up with three different reasons why, but a giant message for mankind was definitely one of those reasons. It wanted to show you that you do go somewhere when you die. Your life doesn't end; it continues on.
But it's not like it's an afterlife in the sense of you're going on to this other dimension or to heaven or to whatever you want to call it. It's more like you're becoming part of this greater bank of knowledge, and you're becoming part of the universe and still able to kind of reach back and direct those who are still living.
Absolutely. And it's all new knowledge that really has never been looked at this way. It shows you that our ancestors and whoever lived before us still exist in some form or another, and somehow they do still connect to the physical world, and that's when you can get into vortexes and all kinds of crazy stuff at that point.
And it seems like this is, like I said, it's like a case study that kind of opens the doors to all of that high strangeness. That it's almost like there's nothing that's off limits in pursuing the research that you have. Like, has there been anything that came at you that you had to say, wait? I mean, once things got rolling, obviously, but did anything come at you and say, wow, now this is a weird direction that I never could wrap my mind around if it wasn't happening?
Well, it was finally when I found the petroglyphs. I had to come up with an explanation. I could handle the supernatural end of it. Was obviously happening for a reason, but I didn't know what that reason was until I found the petroglyphs. And it was obvious when I found these. It was like instantaneous through my thought patterns that when I figured this out, I knew that it was almost like writing the book was one of the reasons I was brought there. to document, because this stuff is all documented. It's not like I dreamed this stuff or I think this was happening. I actually filmed the supernatural activity, and I've got all these rock petroglyphs on. I got hundreds of portable petroglyphs. But really difficult to get the scientific community involved. Very difficult, because they're taught not that this stuff doesn't exist. So how can they ever admit to that it does exist?
But I think part of that too is that you have to kind of suspend everything. Like if you are a quote unquote empirical scientist, you've spent your entire life dedicated to certain rules of physics that you accept as absolutes, and to be able to start looking at all of this stuff objectively, and to be able to say, okay, maybe this is real and it's worth pursuing, you have to be willing to suspend everything that you have spent your entire life kind of accepting as law.
Absolutely. Now, so the scientific community doesn't understand this at all. Even I've written articles for Ancient Origins about the left brain and right brain, because the left brain will look at these rocks and see nothing out of the ordinary. They say, well, these are all natural. And then the right brain person will look at it and see all kinds of images and structures in these carvings. And it's just the left brain, the right brain working against each other. So there's really nothing wrong with not seeing any of this stuff here, but once you see it, it's evident that it's there. And it all has to do with, the mantra of the book is there are no coincidences. Everything's connected, and everything happens for a reason. And now I had to become an Uber driver because to pay my bills while I wrote the book and this sort of thing. And just recently, I picked up a lawyer in town here, and he bought my book. And I sent my book right about. I said like a musician selling CDs out of the back of his car. I sent my books out to Uber, and he bought a copy. And 3 days later, I got a call from him, and he wants me to speak now at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which I didn't even know existed. And so I'm speaking with them next month. But the Institute of Noetic Sciences is about all this science, science and the supernatural blending together. I mean, basically, it's science that proves the supernatural and human consciousness and all this kind of stuff that really is that fluffy stuff you can't really touch, but it's there.
Right, and I think that's a big part of why science doesn't accept the paranormal, but it seems like most of society can, or is at least willing to listen to the idea of it, because we are not regimented by that, and we are not stuck in that mindset of, if it doesn't fit what we think we already know, then how can we understand it, and how can it be known if we would know it already? And so I think that
right. And when the state archaeologist was out there, he was great, but I could tell that he was baffled on what he saw.
Yeah, I mean, you're out of your comfort zone.
He was even more interested in the paranormal end of it, which I was telling him about. He was fascinated with that, and it was really readily accepted that. But the petroglyphs, I'm not so sure.
Well, I think that certainly, we're running out of time here. And, of course, people can pick up the book, The Sibold Effect, Beyond Science, History, Ghosts, and the Appalachian Supernatural. You can get that just by going right to our guest's website, John David Miller's website, and you can get that at thesiboldeffect.com, SIBOLD. And we have it linked up on SpookySouthcoast.com and on all the social media as well. So I recommend people pick up the book to get even deeper into it, and they can follow you on Facebook as well with your Facebook page for the book. But overall, I mean, just if I have one final question for you, it'll be, do you feel like this is going to continue to be your life's work, these connections that are being made? Because it seems like you're never really going to have everything all figured out, and new mysteries and new connections are coming at you every day.
Right. I think my mission now, and I think is to tell the story. get the story out there and to be known. And that's been the hardest thing ever because, number one, I couldn't find a publisher. I couldn't find an agent anywhere that believed me, so I had to self-publish the book. But the book's got 300 photographs in it. It definitely, but to get that message out there, it's very, very difficult. So I think I see myself now doing things like talking at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and doing seminars and hopefully getting people interested in this and getting other people that are interested in it and help me research. I mean, I've just touched the beginning of this stuff. I mean, this is just the icing on the cake. I mean, there's so much more, and I just need people. But there are no experts in this field, I have found.
That's true. I mean, and it's more of a matter of the minute that you think that you know everything that there is to know, that's when the curveballs get thrown at you, and you have to rethink it all over again.
Absolutely. And I think this was all shown to me for purpose to tell the world. But it's taken some time, but slowly but surely.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight and sharing some of your thoughts on it. And again, if everybody wants to pick up the book, the SiboldEffect.com is the website to go to. And you can also check it out on Facebook as well. Definitely a great read. And as you mentioned, lots of photographs, lots of great history. And you start to see these connections and say, hey, maybe there's a reason why I'm drawn to this certain place, or maybe there's a reason why I get these feelings when I go here. And it makes you kind of think about things in your own life as well. So, Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. You have a great night.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
That is our guest, John David Miller. Again, one more time, the SiboldEffect.com, SIBOLD. And that's the name of the book as well. So you can pick it up there. And plus, wherever else you get books, Amazon, all those sites, it's up on all those as well. Well, that does it for this week's show. We will be back next week, right? Next week is not the 9th, right? No. We have another week before the 9th. So we'll be back next week with another show talking more about the paranormal. If you want to follow along with us, you can follow along with us at SpookySouthCoast.com and on Twitter at SpookySC and on Instagram. And download the free Spooky South Coast app so you can catch up on all the shows, over 500 of them for you, with all kinds of paranormal guests and different things. And as I mentioned earlier, there's only about 8 or 9 tickets left for our Lizzie Borden event coming up September 23rd. You can get those tickets at SpookySouthCoast.com as well. So until next week, for Matt, for Stephanie, for Chris, and Ashley, I'm Tim. Stay spooktacular.